Digital is a new space.
In a global world, things are changing. So if you don't keep yourself updated, you may not do the right thing.
The digital space is a great space in fostering innovation.
Providing access, internet access to the underserved, particularly educational institutions and healthcare facilities.
This is actually changing the whole spectrum of TVET.
Kakamega Vocational Training Center is among the 68 polytechnics or VTCs in Kakamega County. We have a total number of 8 courses, all of them depending on ICT. The polytechnic had only 3 computers that were running across departments. Kenya people could not even like to interact with the TVETs. They believed it's a home of failures because learning was very traditional.
We didn't have internet, so we only relied on books. In most cases, we just used to learn theory.
We conduct continuous medical education, CMEs every Wednesday. So initially, we used to use the projector, which was a bit difficult even to set up and to work with. During medical education sessions, when they don't have airtime, it used to be difficult for members of staff to access the internet.
A lot of collaboration was needed to be able to enhance broadband access to the underserved, and this needed contribution from the government, private sector, and also the communities. With the support of Huawei having to go on site and deploy infrastructure in places where dark fiber had been identified and deliver access to institutions that previously did not have internet access, that was tremendous. Deploy fiber network to 2 TVETs. There's also the provision of smart screens, now not only for the academic institutions, the TVETs, but also for the healthcare facilities, to serve and contribute to telemedicine initiatives to these healthcare facilities.
And this idea screen has been of great use to us. We're able to connect, direct, and make the presentation. Virtual sharing of information between facilities, they are able to be more effective, and therefore it makes their work easier and handling patients.
Once the internet came in, we have enough computers. All trainings, they are done here. Learning has been very easy in these institutions.
Youth within the community were impressed with the ICT and the internet connection. The Polytechnic even grew in high number of enrollment, right from 286 to 636.
Availability of internet has helped me more things like networking, seeking job online, communication, advertisement. It has now opened me millions of opportunities.
And so I think that collaboration is very fruitful. It is needed.
I think we're having this conversation against the backdrop of what is known as the YSIS Plus 20 review. I think many people pronounce it differently. Some of us say YSIS, whatever it is, but in full it's the World Summit on the Information Society. We are undergoing a 20 years review. So for the benefit of everyone, I'll just start with Liz to just give us an overview of what that process is and why it's important. And which is the context in which we're having this conversation, Liz.
I will give an overview on YSIS as how I understand it, because I also got the process in the middle, and I started engaging actively in it somewhere around last year. So YSIS, World Summit Information Society, is a global governance processes that is spearheaded by the UN to look at how the world can harness technologies and minimize the challenges that we have, challenges of equality and other harms. The processes started in 2002, and that's where there was a recognition that ICTs have a very big transformative power to development. And UN, which is in charge of global development, elimination of poverty, it's so that technology can play a very big role in it. So it started the WISES initiative to see how ICTs can propel us towards sustainable development. But then, so that was in 2002, and the world also, or global leaders, also in the process came up with the WISES principles, things like equality, inclusion, and things like that. And then there's another process, a 2005 process, which I usually call it the political process or the governance process. So this is where now the WISES reaffirmed the principles, agenda on digital development and sustainable development, connecting the two. And then we have the 2005 one. And the 2005 one also came up with action plans, things to deal with the development, different agendas on development. There's access, there's climate change, there's financing. And so every year, the UN convenes, the UN and ITU, because the UN deals with sustainable development and ITU deals with IT. So in their shared role, they usually convene people to discuss, now where are we on the agenda of ICT and development. So every year there's a forum called the WISES high-level event, and it's different from the review process. So that was done in 2005, and also setting up mechanisms to also give a report to the UNGA on where people are at WISES and IT and development. So the 2005 process, it set up a governance principle to ICTs and internet governance. And it defined internet governance as a sort of a shared role between different stakeholders in the development of the internet. They are shared roles, but they have their own specific roles contributing to the evolution of the internet. And that is how also the principle of multi-stakeholderism has also spread across the governance of global digital technologies. I'll tie to how also it's related to the IGFs. So with recognition of that definition also, it established the IGF to be a global forum where now people come and discuss the agendas of the governance of global digital technologies, different agenda, be it access, be it internet resources like the domain names and so on. So this Internet Governance Forum is a multi-stakeholder forum where government, academia, civil society, they come and discuss how internet should be governed and what's the status. So later on we started seeing regional initiatives on internet governance, so that it's a bottom-up process. Actually, multi-stakeholderism is defined as a bottom-up process where ideas come from down to up policies. My last one now on the WISES plus 20 review. So the first WISES was 2005, and then it set up 10 years reviews process. So the first review was in 2010, and now we are on the second review. Since 2005 is now 20 years. Now there's that plus 20 review, and the world is taking stock. So what's happening with WISES? Where are we with the action lines, the agenda of access, financing, sustainable development, emerging technologies? Where are we, and how are we governing technology? What is this multi-stakeholder? Are we still giving all stakeholders a chance in the global development of digital technologies? So that is what is now being discussed in the plus 20 review, and afterwards in September. So right now, the two organizations, UN and ITU, have collected feedback from people, and they've developed a report on where we are on these metrics, as well as the things that we look ahead. So this report is going to be tabled at UN convenings, so that they also discuss where are we going with these issues. So YC set up the IGF. IGF is going to be one of the issues that is going to be discussed. Are we going to continue with the IGFs or not? And that is why IGFs are not being hosted in December, in September. They've been moved ahead so that they give that space for the YC's discussion and also the people negotiating, which is governments, to look at the significance of it and how to strengthen it, or whether it's still relevant or not. I will stop there.
Yeah, thank you, Liz, for just laying the context for us. I'll come to Bridget and Joe and Leo, and to just, I think a great essence of this digital governance conversation is the multi-stakeholder engagement that we have at different levels. And the question then is, what are the challenges as we look into YCs and how it's going to be conducted? What are the challenges in terms of meaningful engagement in those platforms? I know the most recent such engagement, for instance, with the Global Digital Compact, I know most of us here expressed some reservations on how the process was conducted in terms of engagement. So just to hear from you about the challenges. Yeah.
Thank you, Jane. Thinking about the challenges, and it's not just a versus problem, right? And I know, Jane, for instance, had a quick conversation with you outside on why we're not engaging at such a high level at certain fora, and especially with regional fora. And I start to think of, number one, what I mentioned to you outside, the democratic state of our parties, or the state parties of these global fora, whether we're talking about the AU or we're talking about parties that are, signatory to ACHPR and other regional mechanisms. There's a huge focus on sovereignty, which is not a bad thing. But when it comes to a collective power, a collective movement, it limits just how much people can engage. Another thing that has become apparent is that a lot of these spaces are inaccessible. And even before we started this panel, we had a quick conversation about the fact that not a lot of people have engaged even with WSIS, right? Not a lot of people know what it is. That's because a lot of these spaces are inaccessible, whether this is because of the language that is used being highly technical, whether it's because they're not highly publicized so people don't know that they're happening, or even if you do know, it's almost impossible for you to get into a meeting or say what you think, right? And the reality is that we need to shift the values with which we hold some of these spaces and some of these fora, so that people, especially people at the margins, can be better represented and can represent their opinions and facts, so that we have a more holistic overview of the issues that we need to address. The other thing that I would say is a problem when it comes to engaging in this manner is also the inability to form trust within a multi-stakeholder model. It requires a lot of time and it requires a lot of effort on the part of everybody in the room, right? If I'm with civil society and somebody else is at a private company, how do we form trust between us so that we can have a genuine conversation? How do I know that what I say is not going to be used against me so that I don't get funding in the next cycle of funding, right? How do I know that what I say even will be taken into consideration? And again, going into communities, especially communities that have been historically underserved, there's a lot of trust that has already been lost because people are left out historically and systemically of conversations that they need to be part of. And so because they don't trust what you're saying, it's very difficult for them to give feedback. So these two things need to change significantly for these processes to become more meaningful.
I think those were very good background reference points in relation to the conversations we're having today at the Kenya Internet Governance Forum. I think importantly, I think it's good to remember the genesis of the internet. I think a lot of us perhaps have not quite contextualized where this very great technology emanated from. so that maybe we can then understand from that background how it is that we are where we are now. Most of what you see, whether it's especially WUSIS, what I used to call it WUSIS, that's what a lot of people used to say, it's WUSIS. Around 2001, 2002, the Geneva and then the Tunis process was as a result of what was happening and the realization by many governments that as the internet was growing, there seems to have been this divide that seems to have been created by the internet being largely what you'd want to call an English paradigm, in the sense that I think if you look at the history of it, for instance, there were 6 regional nodes in the US. One was in UCLA, Stanford, Santa Barbara, University of Utah. Later there's Princeton, University of Illinois, Michigan, California, and John Hopkins University. So you tend to see then that it was through AppNet, the origin of it is that it became something that looked like to have come from the United States of America, and we're very glad for that. And now the conversations were happening within different countries as to how do we manage this, what has become a resource. And that's where the 2001 process and the 2005 process then gave rise to the UN telling, the WUSIS telling the UN to convene what is known as the IGF. And the IGF has been convened every time since then. There was a renewal process, which then gave it a 10-year lease that's running out in this year, and we are looking to see what happens after that. Obviously, there's the Summit of the Future. I think one of the things that becomes rather apparent if you spend a lot of time in this space is that there are a lot of acronyms. In fact, my own observation is that there are too many acronyms. Most of us in our languages, we are not used to acronyms. We are used to words that describe something. So the Global Digital Compact, a lot of people talk about it, but if you don't know what it is, you struggle. You perhaps have to go to Google to find out what it means. So those are the challenges we have. And this is one aspect which I find quite comforting, in that in 2025, in this room here in South Sea, we are bridging the information asymmetries. There used to be a lot more. I think somebody said earlier in the conference, the chair of KICTANet, that there were a few Kenyans. I think most of you will not know that there was a lady known as Njeri Rionge. She once sat on the board of ICANN. A lot of people did not know what ICANN was. I was involved in one of the earliest quest to, there used to be a lot of cyber squatting. Cyber squatting is where people sit on your domain and ask for money so that they can let you have it, and they're not trading with it. So ICANN is this organization that runs these processes, and it's something that we are glad it exists and does what it does. But the IGF processes does the bottom up in order to be able to look at this environment and find out that everything is working according to what many countries would want. There has been a lot of democratization of the internet. Internet now is available in many languages. We perhaps are not doing enough in the Global South to make sure that most of the content on the internet is in our languages, but that's something that we look forward to. And maybe just as an aspect about the SDGs, I think the SDGs on information were, I think, 37 and 25 or something like that. They came out of what were known as the Millennium Development Goals. We were supposed to be in such a high state as societies by 2000. Obviously that did not happen. So now we reverted to what are known as Sustainable Development Goals, and that's what we are still under until this very moment. And we are glad that we are action plans to be able to do that as a country. So that is a context in relation to which I would look at the question of multi-stakeholderism. We are trying as much as possible to bridge the information asymmetries so that a lot more people know how this environment operates, and and as nature would have it, we now have artificial intelligence with us, and we had not yet caught up with what the internet is fully capable of. So we are truly running at a speed that should get us assimilating all this in very quick fashion. Hopefully we get there, and by this environment, I think we are getting there.
I think it's been a process of learning, and you know, that's for me number one: listening, learning, and shifting, because the world is so fast moving, and you know, we at Access Now we have these conversations every week where we ask each other, okay, who's breaking what? Because a lot of the time in the tech sector, people build things, break them, and then you kind of have to come back and fix them because they're more concerned with innovation than, you know, the human rights and the people who they're leaving behind. So listening, learning, shifting. Each context requires a specific reaction, and so we are listening to whoever we need to listen to, and this is a multi-stakeholder form of listening where we have conversations with every single person and figure out what we need to do to respond. Number two, and what is most important to us as an organization, is that we work with a grassroots to global model. So this means that we don't take decisions without going to our community and speaking to our community. So the way in which our structure sits is that it's a global organization that has regional aspects, and within those regional aspects we work in specific countries, and in those countries we work with specific communities who are most at the margins of the issues that we work on. So then this means we have to consistently, and it takes a very long time then, and that's, I guess, the price that you have to pay to do things right. It takes a lot of time to go to the community, speak to the community, understand the issues from their perspective, as opposed to, you know, a factual basis of understanding, which is of course the easiest way to do things. Read a book, understand the, you know, the literature on it, and then go and do the thing and build a policy. But then you need to contextualize some of these issues. So you go back to community, speak to the community, understand what the issue is, understand what their priorities are, and then build our priorities around that. We also convene RightsCon every year, which is an annual conference on digital rights, where we have multi-stakeholder representation, and we do prioritize representation, of course, because again, as I've said before, a lot of these spaces are inaccessible. And even as we're talking about, you know, a lot of formal processes that happen, and I've had Leo mention a few of them, including the OGP, and even certain formal processes such as public participation that is held by the government, the reality is that a lot of these spaces still remain inaccessible. So we are trying as much as possible to prioritize representation. What does representation look like in a meaningful way? It's not having big tech there, talking to 3 civil society organizations that have huge budgets and can send 10 people, while a community organization or a CBO cannot send a single person. So then we also have a pot of funds every year where we provide a community fund for people to come to RightsCon who would ordinarily not have that kind of opportunity, so that they can have access to these spaces and access to certain people and certain conversations that they would ordinarily not have access to.
And specifically in the context of the African regional engagement, Bridget and I were having a conversation, and we are asking ourselves, is there really appetite at that level? For instance, if you reflect on the Malabo Convention, and we were sharing some reflections and thinking maybe the problem is that there was not engagement from the beginning. Why are we stalling so much? So what is your assessment at that, the regional frameworks and platforms in terms of ensuring engagement?
It's an interesting question, and also one that maybe one wants to figure out why it is then that, for instance, Kenya is so much ahead. Yeah. For instance, when you talk about Kenya IGF, it's KICTANet that has done this for 18 years continuously. The question sometimes you want to ask is, of the 54 countries in Africa, maybe other than Egypt, I don't know whether South Africa has any equivalent, are these conversations happening? So that you find that I think my short look at the Malabo Convention is that I think it was done by largely out of Addis Ababa. And the question one asks is, how long did it take to come into force? I don't know, most of you can Google that. I think at some point there were only, I don't know, 5 countries that had signed on to it. Yeah. So sometimes the regional take is perhaps, I don't know whether I wouldn't use the word indictment, but it's perhaps maybe something we need to interrogate more, so that we find out why does what happens in Addis Ababa looks to be disconnected from what's happening in other capitals. Because I ask that question because you have these very nice documents coming out of Addis, but if you go to many capitals, many of the citizens in that country do not know that that's what the AU is doing. Yet we have these very nice PDF documents online. So the question sometimes, and this is maybe an aspect maybe the AU can pick from Kenya and can pick from KICTANet, is to have this, what the equivalent of Kenya's schools of internet governance, so that you have this information being taken out to many citizens in many countries, so that the global south to south debates become very informed, and so that we can be able to take this into Geneva or into New York, as the case may be. So that is my take on it. And sometimes also you want to find out what domestication is happening as a result of the Malabo Convention. How many countries after ratifying, after it became a treaty, then how many of them are domesticating what needs to be done under the Malabo Convention? So those are questions we want to ask. But I think importantly also, and this came out of, I think, Smart Africa, and it's also coming out of the Global Digital Compact, is that there aren't sufficient resources being deployed in African countries for internet penetration. It's just factual. So that if this resource is not being seen as something that is good for countries, then it becomes difficult for those of us maybe here and elsewhere looking at what these engagements are asking us to do, to then engage in that. You want to ask how many internet shutdowns happened in Africa. It's a question you want to ask. How many were in South America, for instance? You can ask that question. And the question is why? Why? So the little internet that there is seems to be switched off at some point, predominantly in perhaps one continent. And the question is why? The question is why, whereas it's a sorely needed resource. So mine is to say that this has to continue. As she says, it's learning, shifting. You said breaking. I don't know what we need to break, but it's a larger governance. It's a larger governance issue, and the democratic space is opening. And now, with the advent of artificial intelligence, the real information society is coming into being. We used to have Wikipedias. Now we don't need Wikipedias. We just need one resource of some entities that have scraped all the data that has ever been created, and you can access any information you want at any time, with accuracies upwards of maybe 80%, one would say that. But mostly what we want to say is that it augments the intelligence that we have. So I don't know whether that answers the question, but sometimes the background also has more answers than not. If I haven't, I apologize.
I want to come back to you, Liz. maybe you can also comment on the regional level. I think the Malabo Convention was 2014, but then we've had more recent documents like the AI strategy. Do you think we have learned any lessons at an African level in terms of engagement? And then as you respond to that, also please respond to the question around what policies and technical standards should Kenya be championing at this local, regional, international level to just reduce fragmentation and to enhance more concise and aligned policies.
My number one answer to why Africa regional policies fail is that we don't invest in policies. Even at national level, we don't even invest in policies. I know we have donor organizations here who support us, but the reality here is that these policies don't come from us. It's an idea that comes to us because another continent sees it as an agenda and it comes down. And even when we see it as an agenda, we look for funds elsewhere. It doesn't come from our own pockets, from our own treasuries to develop. So we end up with policies that look like we've borrowed them from outside. They also don't speak to our context. And then also some of them, they also come from here. But policymakers don't listen to the think tanks that are here. Yeah, there are digital think tanks in Africa, but we don't listen to them. The other thing is that when we develop policies like Malabo Convention, AI strategy, national AI strategy, it doesn't stop there. Otherwise, it just becomes a document that we put on the shelves and then it gathers dust. It needs money. The GDPR, EU puts money into the implementation of the GDPR, ensuring compliance, ensuring capacity building, ensuring that the people it affects are actually aware of this. There's a lot of actions or efforts that come into on policy implementation. The other thing that I see as a challenge for regional policies is that Africa is a continent that has a lot of inequalities. We are not at the same level. Democratically, we are not at the same level. In terms of technological development, we are not at the same level. So we developed the Malabo Convention. We want to harmonize cybersecurity policies, but we can't even have that mutual assistance between Kenya and Burundi because they are not at the same level of policies. For us, let's say, to coordinate on how to address cybersecurity or how to respond to even incidents. Even technology itself, you're not at the same level of development. For us even to have cross-border data flows, and that's another issue to deal with. Very many things on human rights and the handling of data, also development. The whole African agenda of digital development is actually being affected by that unevenness between countries and even within countries themselves. I'd like to speak to the challenge of also WISEs, because as we talk about how our daily lives, even our governance, is being affected by technologies, looking at these policy processes at the WISEs level, it's a voluntary reporting, right? So a country may decide this year they are going to report, next year they're not going to report, and these processes sometimes they're not multi-stakeholder. Like, have you ever read the report of what Kenya put up on the UN website on where we are at? So it's not being made compulsory. It's also not being made being developed in a multi-stakeholder way from the grassroots going up. The other one is geopolitics. and when you're talking about multi-stakeholderism, there's this Sao Paulo principles that actually defines what is meaningful multi-stakeholderism. So in 2005, that principle came up, and it recognized that all stakeholders should come up and discuss matters of internet governance. But from 2005 to 2010, even to the years 2020, we realized that there are imbalances of power, so that even when we participate, sometimes our views are not being taken in because there's another power. When it comes again to internet governance, some stakeholders have more power in their different roles than others. Now, this is not in the negotiation room. We might come and talk about, oh, internet should be accessible to everyone. But when you go back to countries and even globally, we see it's only two stakeholders who roll out internet, and they're the ones who drive that process. So that is not balanced there. Geopolitics of it, because government and private sector have a lot of power right now. It's even being recognized that countries in the global north have this a lot, and they are controlling data flows. And countries that don't have, the countries are being denied the opportunity, not even opportunity, the ability to protect their people when their data is outside. So they can have data protection policies, but when someone gets your data from somewhere else, misuses it, infringes on your rights, how can the Kenyan government protect you when it's outside? So things like that. But yet again, when it comes to that situation, does Kenya have can it negotiate so that it has control of the data of its citizens for that protection? Speaking to that, it's a very critical issue when you talk about sovereignty, because years ago there was an argument that the internet should be open, that there should be no laws on the internet, it should be free of governance, and that is what enabled innovation after innovation, right? But now we've started seeing the harms, and we started seeing countries now advocating for sovereignty, for the same things, saying that these are our citizens, you have digital assets or data of theirs, we need to have a say in how this is being governed. So this geopolitics is really disrupting digital sovereignty. But also, as we are talking of digital sovereignty, there's that balance where African countries, he's spoken of internet shutdowns, sometimes it's even social media shutdowns. When some of us are given that power to actually govern people's digital affairs, then we go overboard. We are not democratic with it. So what balances of sovereignty are we also looking for? I know I'm scattering around the points, but the other thing that I would also like to speak on as a challenge is duplication of process, which is also affecting multi-stakeholderism. So today we have the YSIS plus 20 review. When we are discussing the issues on YSIS, we realize that we are discussing the same issues on the Global Digital Compact. Global Digital Compact right now on the implementation phase is going to have even more than 5 phases. We're having the data governance track, the AI governance, we are having the rest. Each of them, let's say they're going to have 2 meetings, global meetings, within a year. We're also having YSIS, which is also having a consultation process, 4 meetings in a year. So you find that as a civil society, you have to set budget for around 10 meetings for global governance of digital technologies, discussing the same things. And that's why there's also this call that YSIS should look at how to strengthen processes such as IGF and minimize duplication of UN function. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Liz. I think I feel like we have kind of been pessimistic. We've talked a lot about the challenges. So before I come back to my panelists to give us the way forwards on things that we've not tackled, I just want to open the floor if you have any questions to specific panelists, or if you just have a comment, or yeah, you can also give a recommendation.
My name is Grace Oluwande, representing Action for Children Development Center, and I wanted to ask the question on AI. So basically, as organizations dealing with children, and AI has become a basic commodity in terms of education, and also in terms of maybe children finding out some things from AI. So the challenge that we have, the AI knowledge is not basically available to children who are in rural areas, and especially when when you tell them about AI, they tell you, what is AI? So on the tech, what are they doing to ensure that this tech reach the ground, the grassroots? Because it has also come to our notice that we CSOs, we are not in a position like to channel everything to them. That is my first question. Then second question is still on the AI. So AI basically has this tendency of discrimination. You find that when you are a black and maybe you are a Kenyan. So for example, I ask AI, what can be the best food for me to prepare for breakfast as a Kenyan? AI will give me bacons and sausages. So on the same note, how are we modeling this AI to fit in African system and also use the simplest language that children can understand? Thank you.
My name is Victoria. I am in tech. So I have several questions. Two go to Leo. Just one. Okay, two. We've said that we have limited participation on the grassroots. So my question is, are we ready to engage in not so conventional platforms like social media? And are we ready to engage in the not so conventional language like normal Kenyan slang and the like? And then to Leo, I will ask about, he said that concerning the African shutdowns on internet, are we ready and do we have the capacity as Africans to have our own internet?
Yeah, hello, my name is Andrew Kesarema. I run a community-based organization called Good Samaritan Ambassadors out there in Narok, Kilgoris. So I speak for the voice of the indigenous community, the Maasai community, who have been left behind for many, many years. So my question is, in terms of CSOs, right now the biggest challenge in CSOs is funding and funding models and getting money to do projects for our people. As you can see, that's the biggest challenge. So what advice can you offer me as I run a CBO helping youth and women empowerment in the village to be able to get funds, to be able to run these projects, to change and to create value addition for our people in the rural area? Thank you.
My name is Edith Njero. I am an engineer. Something just came to mind as you discussed about internet governance. If you remember, like even in the digital broadcasting, the world is structured in 3 regions in terms of how the standards are done. So I'm just wondering why the internet cannot follow the same model, where like now in Africa we are in region 3, and we also have a lot of regional bodies, like we have ECOWAS, we have SADC, we have the West African regions, so where countries discuss issues that are familiar in their region, and then when they go to the ITU meetings, they are now talking as a block, and even the frequencies, that is how they are structured. So why do we have the internet following a model much like amateur radio, where you can just do whatever you want, and then we don't have a structure. And then when YC says you meet after 10 years, we know the ITU structure is we meet every 4 years. So when you meet after 10 years, when there are so many changes in the technologies, it means by the time we are going for the next forum, Africa will be so far behind. And we know there are so many technologies. Actually, we say there are 20 technologies going on around now. So we will not even have grasped AI when they're talking about so many other complex things.
Thank you so much. I'm Jacob Mgumi. I'm a social worker. I work for an NGO called Young Professionals for Development. My concern is two things. One is about the global data principles. The EU has adopted. I think African countries have not done that. We also have the Internet for Trust by UNESCO. Internet for Trust is also Internet for Trust principles is also an issue which African governments have not adopted. So in this case, then my question is, how does we ensure that African governments, even Kenya included, adopt those policies and principles so that they comply to the global system, ecosystem? And how does now the tech companies keep on violating those principles in the African countries, but at the same time complying within the Western world? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is James Gitari from Tharaka-Nithi, from a community-based organization called AFRICOM. Mine is 3-pointed. One is to Leo. Thank you for bringing in the power dynamics and all that. And mine is to ask, for example, for those of us who work in the indigenous communities where mostly internet doesn't reach, but you find maybe M-Pesa is there, and they can make a call and they can write an SMS, but if you want to do advocacy, then it becomes difficult because the language that maybe the older generation and the younger generation talk is quite different. The culture, the traditions, sometimes you find it's also quite dynamic between the two generations. Yet you want to bring these generations together because if, for example, you're pushing things to do with sexual reproductive health rights, you want all of them to benefit. So how then do we ensure that we don't leave the older generation? Because partly, and even in more, when it comes to household influencing, they are the ones who hold the resources and the final decision. Number two is on governance, and I think Bridget will help me on this to understand that where we have maybe national digital governance and meaningful public participation, how is it cascaded down to the counties? Because one of the main disconnect is where we have very good policies but no budget. And if we don't have a budget for a policy, then it will just be gathering dust, it will not be implemented. If this is taken down to the devolution, is there a possibility that then we can push it down from there so that it works at the grassroots level, since many of the indigenous or the marginalized communities cannot reach the national level? And lastly, how are you going, what are some of the engagements and resources you can provide for grassroots organizations so that they also build their tech capacity, especially in advocacy and even especially in pushing for public participation and governance at the grassroots level? Thank you.
I will start with the last one first because it's fresh in my mind, on how to go down to the grassroots and marginalized communities with public participation. I think, first of all, the reality, and especially when we're working around legislation and advocating around legislation and policy frameworks in this country, it has been notoriously difficult to put public participation on the agenda as a priority, right? It's a little unfortunate that it's not our purview, right? It's the government's responsibility to bring public participation. However, there is something we can do. It's not all hope is lost. And so it's up to us also now to work together with community-based organizations such as yourself to bring that information to people. So it's about disseminating the information as fast as possible, because something that again is recurring is that we have very little time all of the time to, to engage on these issues. You get frameworks being put out in 1 week to bring back feedback. So we've had some experience in getting the community-based organizations we work with and grassroots organizations and saying to them, get this document to your people, let them give us their feedback, and then we feed it into the work that we are now then submitting. So it's kind of a process, a collaborative process, and I think that's the only way to get that on the agenda and really make sure that, again, after you submit something, you have to publicize it so that it's known to people, known to the general public, that you are submitting, and that if it's not heard and it's not considered, then someone has a question to answer. So it goes to the transparency mechanisms as well that already exist. There was another question on resources for advocacy. We are localizing, and again, there was another question somewhere on what we are doing to localize, I think by Victoria. We are trying as much as possible to translate our resources, and especially the ones that mean the most to our communities. For instance, with the shutdowns work that we do at Access Now, we've done a lot of work over the last few years to localize our reports, or even condense and localize at the very least the data that we're collecting. And in the past few years, because we work at a regional level, we've localized into Swahili, Oromia, Tigrinya, and Amharic, and we're trying as much as possible to gain enough resources to localize into other languages and disseminate that information a bit more. The other thing that I will answer here is on AI bias and funding being a challenge. AI bias is a problem because, again, these are not our technologies. We haven't built them, and they're deployed here. It's a big problem. And so we need to find ways increasingly to start at the basic level and build our own technology so that it works for us. And then we should not adopt blindly. I think that's a problem that we've had for very many years, where especially on a digital, on a public infrastructure level, technology is being adopted without giving thought to our context. And so we need to push back against such initiatives. And then with the funding question, yes, funding is a big problem. Even for every organization in this room, I would say we need to decolonize the way in which we fundraise, number one. And we need to make sure that we find our own ways to build into ourselves, whether that even means community-based funding and encouraging even the people in this room to give 10 shillings, things like that, starting from the bottom and then building back up and making your work as visible as possible.
It was a very interesting question, and I'm sure it's a question that was asked by maybe an African delegate in 2001. Why can't we have our own internet? I don't know what it means by African internet. I don't know what that would be, how it would look like. But I don't think even it's desirable. So I would just say sorry now. And the question of regionalization also, that came out of ITU regions in relation to the radio frequency spectrum in region 1, 2, and 3. I think we fall where we fall. And even when the opportunity was given to us to develop technologies for digital transition, we adopted the European standards. So it doesn't go to show that because we have a region that we know or we have the capacity to do what we want to do with it. It's largely also because we don't invest a lot in some of these R&Ds that are required for these technologies. So I would say if it's the nature of the internet and why the WUSIS process is there and the ITU and the IGF process are there is to keep the internet open. And it's very, very important that it remains open for interoperability and many other reasons. So it's not a desire for us to have an African internet. I think there was a question about ECOWAS and COMESA. I do not know that those regional bodies have the capacity to manage internet resources at all.
I think what WISES envisioned the plus 10 years review is to review what has happened in the 10 years, whether to affirm the principles, and also whether to revise the action plans of WISES, recognizing that there are different processes that are also happening in between. Remember, there's a WISES high-level forum where different UN bodies, when a development agenda on, let's say, on immigration has to do with technology, UN immigration will come to the WISES forum, which is also a multi-stakeholder forum, to come and discuss with ITU what synergies, what developments are there. So the 10 years is just for states to come and affirm, do we want this process again? And then they start discussing again. UN itself has different processes on digital agenda. So it's just recognizing that there are other processes that are babies of WISES. IGF is also a baby of WISES, and it takes place also every year, which is a soft policy itself. What was the other one?
I think I'll stop the Q&A there,
Okay.
and then allow us to continue to engage on Slido. But to just help me wrap up this panel is to, in one word, just finally, if you were to say one best practice that you think that would strengthen this multi-stakeholder sort of engagement. I'll start with Leo and then come down to all of us here. Just one. You're muted, Leo, just unmute. Okay, then, yeah, okay. We can start with Liz and then we'll come down.
Sorry, I didn't have the right to unmute myself. Mine would be like 3 words, not one word, but it's participation by design, right from the get-go, and not just at the end of the policy-making process.
Yeah, for me, I think for WISES to work at a global level, we have to see how we are going to redistribute global digital assets. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Joe? Liz, please pass the mic.
Sorry, and thank you. Maybe I'll just use words that are known in Kenya. Some of it may indicate how long we have been in this space. Maybe just have more kamukunjis on this question. And for the kamukunjis to be effective, we need a lot of people coming into that kamukunjis with what used to be known as more Kenyas, meaning you have more knowledge than many people. So we need to invest a lot in knowledge.
I would say design from the margins. Find the people who stand to suffer the highest risk and design from their point of view.
Thank you. Yeah, if you don't remember anything else, just remember participation by design, devolve digital resources, kamukunjis with Mwakenya, design from the margins. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope this was an engaging forum. Looking forward to pushing these conversations and continuing to engage throughout the day. To my panelists, thank you so much.
our learners only can learn well by doing and by seeing. And being in a rural school, that is a village school, we do not have many things, as in we get our knowledge only in books. You teach something, they haven't seen it, they have never seen it, so it is abstract in their minds. And so I was able to show them some videos, and it has been good. It is creating interest in the learners. Whenever we get any strange material from the books, we are given a link there in that book. So we are now opening those links, and in every teaching subject now, I mean every teaching subject, including even mathematics. So we are integrating ICT in every learning area in the school. If these learners were left alone, it means that they would not be competent enough to go to the world and to compete with the other learners who are accessing ICT. So now, as a teacher, I'm so happy because now, when these learners are accessing the devices as early as grade 1, that is 7 years, 6 years, it means that when they are exiting school, they will be as competent